Let's turn to Donald Trump, because the US president has said Europe is a, quote, decaying group of nations led by, quote, weak people. Donald Trump was speaking to the website Politico after the publication of the new US national security strategy, which argued that democracy was under threat in Europe and promised that America would cultivate resistance to that trend. Well, in response, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz has described some of the claims as incomprehensible and said Europe did not need the US to help save its democracies. Well, let's hear a little of what Donald Trump had to say to Politico about immigration and Europe.
Europe I'm friendly with all of them. I mean, I like all of them. I have no real enemy. I've had a couple that I didn't like over the years. I actually like the current crew. I like them a lot. But and I know them very well. I know them really well. Some are friends, some are okay. I know the good leaders, I know the bad leaders, I know the smart ones, I know the stupid ones. You got some real stupid ones too.
Okay, so this is absolutely incredible. And I need you to understand just how badly Trump is sabotaging America's position in the world, because Trump released a national security strategy that is basically a roadmap to American decline. And come on, Trump is supposed to be this master deal maker. Trump is supposed to be this guy who makes incredible deals. Trump built his entire brand on the idea that he's the best negotiator in the world. He's written books about deal making. He's talked about nothing but deals for his entire career. But this national security strategy, this is not a deal. This is Trump basically unilaterally telling all of America's allies that America is done with them. This is Trump basically saying to Europe, you're weak, you're decaying, America doesn't need you anymore. This is Trump basically telling Japan and South Korea that America might not defend you anymore. This is Trump basically telling the entire world that America is pulling back and the rest of you can figure things out for yourselves. And this is the opposite of deal making. This is self-sabotage. This is Trump destroying America's alliances without getting anything in return. This is Trump handing wins to China and Russia on a silver platter. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
With the Trump administration's drastic changes to U.S. national security strategy and its very role in the world, the document, which lays out U.S. foreign policy priorities, sounds a clear retreat, stating, quote, the days of the U.S. propping up the entire world order like Atlas are over. The message to U.S. allies is that they, quote, must assume primary responsibility for their regions and contribute far more to our collective defense. One might say that means you, NATO, and Japan, and South Korea, and others. The American priorities in Ukraine now are to end the war fast and to make nice with Moscow, to, quote, reestablish strategic stability with Russia. Take note, for Israel and Saudi Arabia and others, the document says that America's reasons for focusing on the Middle East will recede. That's quite a change. And in an attempt to impose a MAGA agenda on Europe.
So here's what happened. On December 4th, 2025, Trump released his national security strategy. This is supposed to be the document that outlines America's foreign policy for the next 4 years. This is supposed to explain to the world what America's priorities are and how America is going to interact with the rest of the world. And what Trump did was he released a strategy that basically says America doesn't care about alliances anymore. Trump's strategy says the rules-based international order is dead. Trump's strategy says it's just going to be might makes right and superpowers doing whatever they want. Trump's strategy basically says that Europe is decaying and America is done trying to save it. And then Trump had the audacity to act surprised when the entire world came out and said, "Are you serious right now?" And the backlash was immediate and absolutely devastating. Europe came out united against this strategy. The EU said that this is not America first, this is America alone. Britain said that this is creating unpredictable volatility. France said that Europe is going to have to build its own military power because it can't rely on America anymore. And think about what Trump just did. Trump just told America's closest allies that America is abandoning them. Trump just told the countries that have stood with America for 70 years that they're not important anymore. Trump just told the countries that have sacrificed blood and treasure alongside America that America doesn't care about them. And then Trump's response was to call these leaders losers. Trump went on Truth Social and basically attacked the people who were criticizing him. Trump doubled down on everything in the strategy that world leaders were upset about. Now, here's what's absolutely insane about this situation. Trump came into office claiming to be the best deal maker in the world. Trump said that he was going to make incredible deals. Trump said that other presidents were bad at deals, but Trump is going to be amazing at deals. But what Trump is doing with this national security strategy is not dealing. This is Trump just declaring that America doesn't care about alliances and walking away. This is Trump not negotiating with allies. This is Trump not trying to get something in return. This is Trump just breaking relationships for no reason. And any real deal maker would understand that you don't break relationships for no reason. You don't alienate your partners for no reason. You don't tell your allies that they're weak and decaying and expect them to keep working with you. That's not deal making. That's the opposite of deal making. That's sabotage. And here's what makes it even worse. Trump is basically handing wins to China and Russia without China and Russia having to do anything. Trump is pulling America back from Europe, which means Russia is going to feel more confident to be aggressive in Europe. Trump is pulling America back from alliances in Asia, which means China is going to feel more confident to be aggressive in Asia. Trump is basically telling China and Russia, go ahead and expand your influence. America is not going to stop you. Trump is basically surrendering American influence without getting anything in return. China doesn't have to negotiate. Russia doesn't have to negotiate. America's just giving them what they want. And Trump thinks this is somehow good for America. Trump thinks that by pulling back, America is going to be stronger. But the opposite is true. By pulling back, Trump is making America weaker and making China and Russia stronger. And the fact that world leaders are responding with a unified backlash shows just how badly Trump has misjudged the situation. Trump probably thought that if he released a strategy saying America is pulling back, America's allies would just accept it and move on. But instead, world leaders are coming out and saying that this is a disaster. World leaders are coming out and saying that this is going to destabilize the world. World leaders are coming out and saying that Trump is the one creating the problem, not solving it. And they're right. Trump's strategy is going to create more instability, not less. Trump's strategy is going to make the world less safe, not more safe. Trump's strategy is going to reduce American power, not increase it. And Trump's arrogance in releasing this strategy without understanding the consequences shows that Trump is not actually a good deal maker. Trump is actually a pretty reckless foreign policy operator who's destroying America's most important relationships. All right, so let's dig deeper into what Trump is actually doing with this national security strategy, because this is not just bad foreign policy. This is Trump actively working against American interests while thinking he's working for them. This is Trump fundamentally misunderstanding how American power works and how alliances function in the modern world. So I need you to really understand what Trump is doing and why it's so catastrophically bad for America, because this is one of those moments where Trump's fundamental incompetence is on full display, and it's going to have massive consequences for American power and American security for decades to come. Let's start with the basic concept that Trump seems not to understand. American power is built on alliances and on shared institutions. America is the most powerful country in the world, but America is not powerful enough to manage global affairs all by itself. America needs allies. America needs partners. America needs other countries to follow American leadership. That's how American power actually works. It's not just military power. It's not just economic power. It's the ability to get other countries to work together with America towards shared goals. And that ability comes from alliances, from shared values, from shared institutions, from the rules-based order that Trump's strategy is abandoning. But Trump thinks American power is just about being the strongest and biggest. Trump thinks that if America is the strongest military power and America has the biggest economy, then America can just do whatever it wants and other countries have to follow. But that's not how it works. That's not how it's ever worked. Even when America was the unchallenged superpower, right after the Cold War ended, America still relied on alliances. America still worked through institutions. America still tried to build consensus with other countries. That's because military and economic power alone are not enough. You need soft power. You need credibility. You need other countries to believe in your leadership. And those things come from alliances and from shared values and from the rules-based order. But Trump's strategy is basically abandoning all of that. Trump's strategy is saying, forget about shared values. Forget about shared institutions. Forget about trying to build consensus with other countries. America is just going to be another superpower that cares about power and nothing else. America is just going to do whatever it wants, and the rest of the world can deal with it. And what Trump doesn't understand is that when you abandon soft power, when you abandon credibility, when you abandon the things that make countries want to follow your leadership, you lose power, you lose influence, you lose the ability to shape what happens in the world. And here's the thing that's really crucial to understand about Trump's description of Europe as decaying. Trump's right that Europe faces challenges. Europe does have political divisions. Europe is dealing with migration issues. Europe is dealing with questions about its future. But Trump doesn't understand that these are problems that America can help solve. These are problems that America has an interest in helping solve, because a united, strong Europe is good for America. A united Europe means Europe can balance Russia. A united Europe means Europe can work together with America on shared interests. A united Europe means Europe is stable and doesn't become a source of conflict that eventually pulls America in. But Trump's strategy basically says Europe is decaying, so America is just going to abandon Europe and focus on other things. And what that's going to do is it's going to make Europe weaker. It's going to make Europe more fragmented. It's going to make Europe more vulnerable to Russian aggression. And then America is going to end up having to deal with a much bigger crisis in Europe later on. So Trump thinks that by pulling back from Europe, America is saving resources and focusing on more important things. But actually, by pulling back from Europe, Trump is creating the conditions for a bigger crisis that's going to be much more expensive and much more dangerous for America to deal with later. And the same thing applies to Asia. Trump's strategy is trying to focus on great power competition with China. That's actually a reasonable priority. Competition with China is important for America. But Trump's strategy is simultaneously alienating allies in Asia like Japan and South Korea. Trump is making Japan and South Korea wonder whether they can rely on American security guarantees. Trump is making countries in Asia question whether America is a reliable partner. And when countries in Asia start questioning whether America is reliable, they're going to start making deals with China instead. They're going to start accommodating Chinese demands. They're going to start moving into China's sphere of influence. So Trump's strategy is actually going to weaken America's position in Asia, not strengthen it. Here's what's really important to understand about what Trump means by the Monroe Doctrine and the Trump corollary. The Monroe Doctrine was from 1823, and it basically said Europe stays out of the Western Hemisphere. Trump wants to revive that idea and apply it in the 21st century. But the world has changed completely since 1823. The Western Hemisphere includes places like Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, all these countries that are deeply integrated into the global economy. You can't just say that America dominates the Western Hemisphere and the rest of the world doesn't have influence there, because the world doesn't work that way anymore. Trade is global. Alliances are global. Technology is global. The idea that America can dominate one region and isolate itself from the rest of the world is completely unrealistic. But even if you could isolate America in the Western Hemisphere, that would make America weaker, not stronger. Because America's power comes from having alliances and influence all over the world. America's power comes from being able to shape what happens in Europe, what happens in Asia, what happens in the Middle East. If America pulls back and only focuses on the Western Hemisphere, America loses all that influence and all that power. And then China and Russia fill the void. China expands its influence in Asia. Russia expands its influence in Europe. And America ends up weaker and more isolated, not stronger and more secure. And here's what absolutely crazy about Trump calling this the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Trump is basically naming a foreign policy strategy after himself. Trump is basically claiming credit for abandoning America's alliances. That's narcissism on an absolutely epic scale. Trump is so focused on his own ego and his own brand that he's literally naming a foreign policy doctrine after himself. And that doctrine is basically a recipe for American decline. Trump is proud of a strategy that's going to weaken America. Trump is excited about an approach that's going to reduce American power and influence. Trump thinks he's being clever and bold, but actually he's just being reckless and short-sighted. Now let's talk about what abandoning the rules-based order actually means, because this is the most important part of Trump's strategy. The rules-based order is this system of international law and international institutions that developed after World War II. The basic idea is that all countries, even superpowers, have to follow certain rules. There's the UN Charter, there are trade agreements, there are treaties, there are international courts. And the idea is that even if you're the strongest country in the world, you still have to follow these rules because the rules apply to everyone. And that's actually good for the strongest country, because it means that when you're no longer the strongest country, you still get protected by the rules. You still have a say in how international affairs are managed. But Trump's strategy basically says, forget about the rules. Trump's strategy says might makes right. Trump's strategy says that superpowers are just going to compete for dominance, and whoever wins gets to make the rules. And that sounds good if you're the strongest superpower right now because you think you can win. But what Trump doesn't understand is that America's dominance is not permanent. At some point, America might not be the strongest superpower anymore. And if America has already abandoned the rules-based order, then America loses the protections that the rules-based order provides. So Trump is basically setting up a system where America's future interests are going to be hurt by the approach that Trump thinks is good for America today. And here's what's really important about the global backlash. When world leaders from Europe, from Asia, from different parts of the world all come together to criticize Trump's strategy, that's significant. That's not just normal political disagreement. That's world leaders coming together because they all understand that Trump's strategy is bad for them and bad for global stability. And world leaders from different countries have different interests and different priorities, but they all understand that a world without rules, a world where superpowers just do whatever they want, is a world that's more dangerous and less stable for everyone. So the unified backlash is telling you something really important. Trump's strategy is not just bad for America's allies, it's bad for global stability, it's bad for the entire world order. Okay, so let's break down what this national security strategy actually reveals about Trump and what it means for America's future and what it means for how the world is going to respond to Trump's presidency. Because understanding these implications is crucial for understanding what's going to happen over the next few years and how America's position in the world is going to change as a result of Trump's reckless foreign policy. So let me walk through the main points because these are things that are going to have real consequences for American power, American security, and American prosperity. Point number one is that Trump's strategy reveals that Trump fundamentally doesn't understand how American power works. Trump thinks American power comes from military strength and economic strength. Trump thinks that if America is stronger than everyone else, America can just do whatever it wants. 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 America can, but that's not how it works. American power actually comes from the willingness of other countries to work with America, to follow American leadership, to accept American values and American institutions as legitimate. And that willingness comes from alliances, from shared values, from the rules-based order. When you abandon those things, you lose power. You become just another superpower, and you lose the special position that America has had in the world. So Trump's strategy is actually going to make America weaker because Trump is abandoning the things that actually make America powerful. And here's what's important about that. Trump probably thinks he's being a strong man by adopting this strategy. Trump probably thinks that saying America doesn't care about alliances makes Trump look tough and decisive, but actually it makes Trump look weak and incompetent. A real strong man would understand how to use alliances to increase power. A real deal maker would understand how to negotiate with allies to get the best deal for America. But Trump just abandoned alliances without getting anything in return. Trump didn't negotiate. Trump didn't try to reform NATO or change how alliances work. Trump just said, "We're done with this," and walked away. That's not strength, that's weakness. That's the act of someone who doesn't understand how power actually works. Point number two is that Trump is actively handing wins to China and Russia without them having to do anything. China has been trying to increase its influence in Asia for years. China has been trying to get American allies to switch sides. China has been trying to build alternative alliances that don't include America. But Trump is basically doing China's work for them. Trump is telling America's allies in Asia that America might not be a reliable partner. Trump is making countries like Japan and South Korea question whether they can rely on America. And when countries start questioning whether they can rely on America, they start looking for other options. They start making deals with China. They start moving into China's sphere of influence. So Trump is basically accelerating China's rise and reducing American influence in Asia without China having to do much of anything. And the same thing is happening in Europe with Russia. Russia has been trying to break up NATO for years. Russia has been trying to divide Europe and create cracks in the transatlantic relationship. Russia has been hoping that America would abandon Europe, and Trump's strategy basically gives Russia exactly what it wants. Trump's strategy tells Russia that America doesn't care about Europe anymore. Trump's strategy makes European countries question whether NATO is worth anything if America is not committed to it. And when European countries start questioning NATO, Russia feels emboldened to be more aggressive. Russia feels like it can invade countries in Eastern Europe without America stopping it. So Trump is basically giving Russia what it wants without Russia having to pay any price. Point number three is that this is going to fracture the Republican Party because there are Republicans who understand how foreign policy works and who understand that Trump's strategy is disaster. There are GOP hawks who have spent their whole career supporting NATO. There are Republican national security experts who understand that alliances are the foundation of American power. There are Republican members of Congress who represent districts that rely on military bases and defense spending related to alliance commitments. And all of these Republicans are going to look at Trump's strategy and think, this is insane. This is going to hurt America. This is the opposite of what I believe in. So you're going to see Republicans breaking with Trump on foreign policy. You're going to see GOP hawks criticizing Trump's strategy. You're going to see the Republican Party divided on this issue heading into the midterms. And that's a huge political problem for Trump because Trump needs the GOP to be unified behind him. Trump needs Republicans to support his agenda, But if Republicans are divided on foreign policy, if Republicans are criticizing Trump's national security strategy, then Trump's political coalition is breaking apart. Democrats are going to seize on the divisions within the Republican Party. Democrats are going to say, look, even Republicans think Trump's strategy is insane, and that's going to hurt Trump politically. That's going to make it harder for Trump to maintain support within his own party. Point number 4 is that world leaders are going to start making their own plans, and those plans are not going to include America. When world leaders see that America is abandoning alliances, when world leaders see that America is becoming isolationist, when world leaders see that America is unpredictable and unreliable, they're going to start figuring out how to protect their own interests without relying on America. Europe is going to develop its own military capabilities independent of NATO. Europe is going to build its own military-industrial complex. Europe is going to develop its own defense systems that don't depend on American technology or American protection. And that's going to happen faster and in a less coordinated way than if America had maintained alliance relationships with Europe. So Europe is going to spend more money on defense and get less security as a result. But that's what happens when you abandon allies. Countries in Asia are going to make deals with China. Countries are going to start accommodating Chinese demands. Countries are going to move into China's sphere of influence. And America is going to lose influence in the region. America is going to lose access to military bases. America is going to lose trading partners. America is going to lose allies, and all of that is going to reduce American power in Asia. So Trump's strategy of pulling back from Asia is actually going to strengthen China's position in Asia, not weaken it. Point number 5 is that this is going to increase the likelihood of military conflicts and wars. When there are clear alliances and clear rules about how international relations work, countries know what the consequences of aggression are. But when alliances fall apart, when rules disappear, countries are less certain about what will happen if they're aggressive. And that uncertainty makes countries more likely to take risks. Russia is more likely to invade countries in Eastern Europe if Russia is uncertain about whether America will defend them. China is more likely to invade Taiwan if China is uncertain about whether America will defend Taiwan. And without alliances, America's ability to deter aggression is going to decline significantly. So Trump's strategy is basically increasing the risk of war. Trump's strategy is creating the conditions where countries feel like they can be aggressive because nobody knows what the consequences will be. And ironically, this probably makes America less safe, not more safe. Trump thinks that by pulling back from alliances, America is saving resources and avoiding getting pulled into other countries' conflicts. But actually, by pulling back, Trump is making conflicts more likely, and when conflicts happen, America is going to have to get involved anyway, and by that point, America is going to be in a much weaker position to manage the conflict because America will have already abandoned its allies and lost influence in the region. Point number 6 is that Trump's strategy is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of the 21st century global economy. Trump seems to think that America can go back to the 1950s where America was self-sufficient and didn't rely on global trade or global supply chains. But the world has changed. Supply chains are global. Trade is global. America's economy is deeply integrated into the global economy. You can't just pull back from alliances and expect America to prosper economically. America's prosperity depends on having trading partners. America's prosperity depends on having stable relationships with other countries. America's prosperity depends on being able to project power overseas to protect American interests and American commerce. And by abandoning alliances, Trump is undermining the conditions that have made America prosperous. Point number 7 is that this strategy is going to take years or decades to undo, and the damage to American credibility is going to last a long time. When Trump abandons alliances and then maybe a future president tries to rebuild those alliances, it's not going to be easy. Countries are going to remember that America abandoned them. Countries are going to remember that they couldn't rely on America. Countries are going to be skeptical about whether they can trust American commitments in the future. So even if future presidents try to rebuild alliances and rebuild American credibility, it's going to take a really long time. And in the meantime, China and Russia are going to be expanding their influence and consolidating their power. So Trump's strategy is going to have consequences that extend far beyond Trump's presidency. Trump is basically setting America up for decline for decades to come. So here's the bottom line on this whole situation. Trump released a national security strategy that's supposed to be about making America stronger. But actually, the strategy is about abandoning America's most important relationships and pulling back from the alliances that have been the foundation of American power for 70 years. Trump thinks he's being bold and decisive, but actually, he's being reckless and short-sighted. Trump thinks he's strengthening America, but actually, he's weakening America and handing wins to China and Russia without them having to do anything. And world leaders have recognized this. World leaders have come out and said that Trump's strategy is a disaster. And they're right. Trump's strategy is going to reduce American power, it's going to make the world less stable, and it's going to hurt American interests all over the world. and the consequences of this strategy are going to be felt for decades to come.